All right, welcome back. It's still Rapi John. Hope you had a great time on sports and, of course, Eastern Circle, all the way from the East. And, of course, today is Mama Konak Nights of Songs in Umuahia. And, of course, we're going to broadcast that live right here on Rapi TV, so you do not want to miss any part of it. And just to let you know that we did promise you a great conversation this morning at about 9, and we always keep to our words. If you have been following the conversations in our social space, you would see that we're going to be having a great conversation on what is going on in NELFUND. This is one conversation I've been waiting for 2 months. I will tell you that part. I will be very, very honest. I've been waiting for this conversation for 2 months, or 2 whole months. And I've been pursuing this very guest. And I'm like, we need to have him to have this conversation. Just to let you know that, of course, NELFUND, they are the body in charge of the student loan. And there have been so much controversy regarding to the student loan. Now, the Student Loan Initiative is a program established by the federal government of Nigeria to break financial barriers in higher education through the provision of interest-free loans. And of course, the main fundamental is reshaping the educational landscape. They have a whole lot to do. But in the light of that, lots of students have been complaining about a lot of things. Institutions having their own share of the blame. A part of saying, oh, the money has been diverted to other things. People saying they can't find the money. It's a lot. But we're going to be unpacking all of that in the conversation. And we have a very capable guest to have this talk with us. He would have been the only person to answer all of the questions that we have. So, dear viewers, we have the one and only MD. I think Martha would want to do that introduction herself, because
why do I need to do that? You started already.
She's been waiting for this moment.
Yes, we have the MD CEO of NELFUND right here in the studio with us. And yes, it's an amazing conversation. It's important that we have these conversations because if we have all of these misconceptions, I'll say, flying around the place, and NELFUND thinks they are misconceptions, right?
Well, let's get to it first.
Let's get right into it. So yeah, if we have all of these things moving all over the place and it's not properly being addressed, we just might be moving with the wrong narratives for a very long time. But for now, we have someone, like she said, who is capable enough to answer the questions that we will be throwing out today.
All right, good. Let's now start with the first one. In no particular order, right?
Yeah.
We're going to start with, let's start with the juicy part, which is the controversies. Right, that's the juicy part, which is what many people want to hear. Disbursement, not disbursement. If you look at the recent report, it says that NELFUND had disbursed about how many? Let's go back to the numbers so that we don't miss. About 56 billion naira in its first year. That is what NELFUND said they disbursed. Let's start with that. A lot of people seem to disagree with this number. How would you react to that?
First of all, let me start by saying good morning to you, Martha, and good morning to you, Cynthia. Thank you for having me on your show. You talked about controversies, you've talked about billions. We love these types of things in Nigeria. We love to talk about billions and billions of naira. We like to talk about scandals. We like to talk about discrepancies. We like to talk about this, things that we don't agree with. But look, it's important to clarify certain things for you. We started this program on the 24th of May 2024. When I say we started it on the 24th of May, the President signed this into law on the 4th of April 2024. We started with an online platform, www.nelf.gov.ng. The reason we went online was two things. One, we wanted to eliminate any suggestion of man no man. Okay? Any suggestion that you need to know somebody, you need to give somebody something. So when you go online, it's pretty democratic, it's pretty transparent. Every single transaction we do, therefore, has an electronic footprint. So whatever I say on the television, you push a button somewhere, the answers will come out. Okay? That's why I'm quite happy to give the numbers. The disbursements we've made so far is about 54 billion. And I'll break it into two for you. 30 billion of that 54 billion has gone to institutional fees. When people apply for loans with us, we pay their fees, their institutional fees, direct to the institution. And then we give them a stipend so they can opt to apply for an upkeep of 20,000 naira per month for the session.
Okay.
That's 24 billion that we've disbursed. That's how the 54 billion number comes about. However, you talked about, you know, people disagreeing with that number. Yeah, I mean, I've heard all sorts of things. I don't want to quote anybody in particular. But if you tell me what other numbers you have, I'll be able to show you perhaps how ridiculous some of these things can be. But, you know, there's no fight. It's just the way we are. You know, we criticize everything. And it's probably a good thing that we do that so that we can hold people to account.
Okay.
All right. In 1972, let's take our minds back to where it all started.
Where were you then?
Oh my God.
Okay, let's go back.
All right. In 1972, it all started. Nigerian Student Loans Board disbursed about 46 million naira to the entire loan scheme. And it was discovered that only 6 million naira was refunded, was returned.
Okay.
That's about 13% of the amount of money that was originally disbursed by the Loans Board. Now, these figures that you've called, a lot of Nigerians are still going to apply for this loan. And we cannot decide not to pay attention to the economic realities we have in Nigeria and the employment rate, which is like 10% of these people who will be applying for the loans after the school. Now, what structures has NELFUND put in place to ensure that these monies will be recovered? Because one of the major things that saw that the NSLB never succeeded was the poor rate of the returns of these monies that were being, giving out or were being disbursed because of, legal loopholes and all of that. How does NELFUND plan to ensure that this is a continuous thing?
Okay. So your question speaks to sustainability.
Sustainability.
And I think it's a great question because there's absolutely no point in starting something that will fizzle out in a short space of time.
Certainly.
The truth about this is that we want to ensure that the Nigerian youth of today have access to education. But we don't just want to do that. We want to make sure that the Nigerian youth of tomorrow have access to the same opportunity.
Certainly.
You've talked about how you referred to 1972, the low recovery rate from the people who actually took the loans.
Certainly.
The reality of it is that there are two laws, one of intended consequences and another one of unintended consequences.
Okay.
Look, it's absolutely clear that one of the intentions of this program is to increase the educational base of Nigeria.
Okay.
If you increase the educational base of Nigeria, you will make the economy more vibrant, you will have more people creating work, you will have more people taking jobs that other foreigners perhaps may want to take because we don't have the right qualifications.
Okay.
So, for us at NELFUND, yes, sustainability is absolutely critical to us. However, it's also important to us that we keep our eye on the ball, and we're not just talking about giving loans to people so that we can recover those loans.
Okay.
For what? We need people to be able to use their God-given talents, enhance them by going to institutions that allow them to become the best that they can be for themselves and for the nation. The tax base is going to grow, the economy is going to grow, more jobs will be created. I'm not specifically focused on, how many are going to pay back. And by the way, if you look at loan schemes across the world, the recovery rate and the repayment rates are not great.
Yeah.
We are charging 0% in interest. So already we're somewhat on the back foot. But the reason we have to do that is because we need to encourage people not to worry about what millions or billions, to borrow one of your, that they're going to pay back in the future. We actually want to attract people to take this and make the terms very, very soft for them. Let me make one last point before your next question.
Okay.
These loans are not payable until 2 years after NYSC.
Yes.
At that point, they're only payable if the person gets a job. If they don't get a job, they don't pay. And it's the employer that's obliged to go and look for that person's details on their NIN, or they go to a NIN register to say this person has a loan, and then they deduct 10% and refund it to the Nigeria Education Loan Fund. If they never get a job, they never pay. But that's not the intention here. People will get jobs because the more people you educate, the closer you get to becoming like South Korea, Canada, the US, Germany. These are countries that are successful not because of the color of their skin, but because their people are well educated.
Okay, so I was supposed to ask you about payment, refunding the loan, but then you've touched it. But I'm still not satisfied. I'm sure a lot of people who are still not satisfied, because if you say that it's your employer who is supposed to look for you and then deduct your 10% back to the loan scheme, and the person never gets a job, what happens to that? So it's gone like that?
So, you know...
And also, sorry, while you want to talk about that, I also want to know, in the event the person never gets a job, maybe after like 10 years, will you guys still want that person to refund the loan, or it becomes a bad debt?
So if the reality of it is that, and you use 10 years, because I guess I use 10 years. Look, it's very unlikely, given what I can see the president doing in other areas of this administration, it is highly unlikely that the unemployment rates are going to be as high as you described earlier. We absolutely expect, given the interventions that are going on outside of NELFUND, and the educational revolution that's going on within the Ministry of Education in particular, and some other ministries like the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, the Ministry of Youth Development, there are lots of skills programs and opportunities for people, not just to get the academic side, but to go and actually learn vocational trades and to get involved in things that are more around the creative side. The essence of this is that NELFUND is only an opportunity for people to plug into the wider agenda of the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR. The wider agenda is to create a vibrant economy. NELFUND is part of that. Access to education is a major part of that, because there's a global recognition that the first thing you have to do if you want to make your country go forward is to educate the people. The second thing you have to do is to educate the people. The third thing you have to do is to educate the people. Those three things in one are what make the difference. Not how much I can pull back from somebody who perhaps died in the process and didn't have, couldn't pay the loan back, or somebody who never quite got to the point where they could pay enough or earn enough to pay the loan back. It's a revolving fund, and it's a fund that allows other people to invest in it. Lots of Nigerians today are paying the fees of wards of their children, of total strangers even. This is a formalized process to help, relieve them, relieve the parents, and give peace of mind to the students so that they can come out with the best grades possible.
Okay, and let me just drop on. I know Martha has something in her mind she wants to say, but before we move on to, you were quoted saying something in an interview. Before we move to that part, we understand that NELFUND doesn't get to meet the student in the entire process. And so how do you handle issues that the students will get to face in their access to the fund? Because you don't know them, you don't meet them. It's just based on details that is being uploaded on the portal. So how do you get to address issues that these students have?
That's a good question, Cynthia. Look, you don't need to meet someone to solve their problem. On our portal, we have a link that says contact us. So if students have problems, they literally click on that link and they can raise a ticket and say, this is the issue I'm having. We have an entire team that looks through daily what the issues are, and then we engage with the individuals as we go along. Sometimes we have to call them. We have to make a phone call to actually understand the issues much better. We discourage face-to-face meetings because in a face-to-face meeting, there's opportunity to say, if you do this, we will do this for you. We don't encourage face-to-face meetings. We don't like it. We know that people can be tempted when you have a desperate student in front of you and you are in a position to either help them or to deceive them that you can help them. You can extort that student. So we completely discourage it. Our system is completely online. And if anybody is found to be extorting students, we will absolutely take the greatest measures of discipline against them, including involving the security agencies who we work with anyway.
All right. While I understand that you're trying to ensure that the system is fair enough, right? We know that there are these systems being put in place as well in banks and in many other government parastatals. Now, the problem is not that being put in place. It's how accessible and how effective it is. Because I might lodge a complaint to you and it takes me like months after the school session before I'm being responded to. So how effective is this system and how fast is the response that the students can get from NELFUND?
Okay, I think that's an important question. And I think the answer to it is this. We work as fast as we have the resources to support that. Now, remember that we've never done this before. So NELFUND is a brand new initiative. I can say to you today that we have a run rate of applications of somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 applications every day.
Every day.
That's a lot of applications, especially when we have to go through every single one line by line to understand what the, that the person who's applying is indeed a bona fide applicant. So we're looking at the system closely. I'll tell you, when we paid the first set of upkeep for students, we received 9,000 applications in one day. That's a lot of applications. It's a lot of eyeballs and a lot of lines. But to your question, we try to address the issues as quickly as possible. We don't have a specific service level in place to be able to say this is how long it will take us to resolve it. But one thing we're doing is we are batching the questions. We're looking at the ones that are similar, and we're putting out information around frequently asked questions for this. I should also say to you that, look, when you're running an IT system like this, there are going to be system glitches. It happens in every situation where you have IT systems. You're going to have people who cannot interact with the device or with the platform, either because they lack the knowledge or they're not used to it. Some are very savvy, some are not. So we get lots of tickets around that. We also get, because we also run a system where we have to validate from the institution before we pay, before we disburse, that the students who have applied to us randomly, online, are indeed students of which university did you go?
Calabar, University of Calabar.
University of Calabar. We have to write with a list that the following students applied to applied for a loan with us, and they attend the University of Calabar. We write to the authorities in the institution, validate this list. Some of these institutions respond very quickly. Others are a little bit more lax about that. So in terms of the delays, and actually we have had quite a few delays in that regard, because institutions perhaps haven't responded quickly enough. It's been a problem. The other issue that we've had is that because we're paying upkeep directly to the bank accounts of the individuals, there have been some individuals who have put in the wrong bank details, one digit out. We're not going to make a guess. We're not going to change a 0 to an 8 for them. We just can't tamper with it. So they will not get paid if they've made that mistake. When they come back with the correct bank details, we still have to be very careful, because we need to make sure that it wasn't a trick in the first place. So, there are lots of issues. It's a brand new scheme. We're going to iron them out, but I can assure you, if this scheme is running in 10 years' time, which it will be, there'll still be issues which will still need to be addressed. The issues may be different, but there'll still be issues that need to be addressed. What
difference do you think the issues are going to be in 10 years? Or, look, 10 years too far.
I don't think you can know all of the issues in 10 years.
Maybe it's because...
maybe Cynthia thinks I can see into the future.
Okay. Well, if you can, you can. I mean, if you can see into the future.
Well, I can do my best. I can try.
What if this scheme is not able to stand the test of time? I know. You've said beautiful things. But I mean, we're in Nigeria. A lot of things don't last. Especially when it starts off with a whole lot of ups and downs. We don't see these things lasting. And I also want to even ask you questions regarding to the institutions themselves, because they also have their own problems. We've had students complain that they receive unauthorized deductions between 3,500 to about 30,000. Are you aware of that?
So let me first of all address the issue of things don't last in Nigeria. I don't necessarily agree. I think if you look at the graveyard of failed projects in Singapore, look at the graveyard of failed projects in Canada, you look at the graveyard of failed projects in the United States, the issue is they don't shout about it. They don't say, oh, we did these 20 initiatives and they didn't work. In Nigeria, we love to say, oh, this is dead, that doesn't work, this doesn't. We like to debrand and demarket our own country. I think there's some sort of kick we get out of running down our nation. I'm not going to join in that game. There are things that have been initiated in this country that haven't lasted. There are things that are still going. The NYSC, for example. Nobody talks about, the benefits of that, but it's lasted. 1972, I think it started. So I think we should try and spend a bit of time focusing on that. The second half of your question, Cynthia, I've forgotten.
About the institutions and the
unauthorized
deductions.
Okay, so let me explain what I think has happened, because a lot of the complaints we've had are from students who are saying, we paid our school fees, then NELFUND paid our school fees or our institutional charges, And so there's a double payment to the institution, and now we want the institution or NELFUND to refund us the money because we have a debt. Unfortunately, some of the institutions have not refunded the money in time. Others, probably quite properly. When you need to make a refund, there may be bank charges that they need to make. And you know, these are institutions that have to account for money. So there's that difficulty. The institutions also don't have the institutional memory or the institutional framework for refunding to students. So a lot of them are struggling with this idea. But let me go back to how we got there in the first place. We started this scheme on the 24th of May, 2024. And we started midstream or mid-session for a lot of institutions because the president was insistent that people are about to drop out from institutions and we need to make this available to them so that we can stop somebody who's been in an institution for 3 years, has got 1 year to graduate, mother dies, father dies, something happens and they're about to drop out. So we opened our channels mid-year. Normally, in most environments, you would start a scheme like this at the beginning of the academic session for the majority of institutions. But we started at midstream, so which meant basically that people were applying, even though some of their deadlines were the following week or the following day or the following month. Some people even delayed their application. This meant that by the time we go through the process of actually determining eligibility for the loan, sometimes a deadline has already caught up with them where they have to pay. So they've had to make payments to the institutions. When our payment follows, it then becomes a double payment. So there are issues of refunds, issues of deductions from specific or certain institutions. We're looking at all these institutions to see the ones that are doing this deliberately, to see the ones that are doing this inadvertently. But we need to understand it because at the center of all of this grammar is a student, right? And that student needs the opportunity to get an education just like we have had. And we want to focus on them, and we'll do everything to make sure that those students are the ones who benefit the most. Is it going to be immediate? No. Are we in a learning process? Yes. Are we going to get there? Definitely. We're absolutely determined, and the political will from the presidency is that we must do this and we must do it properly. Looking into the future, 10 years time, do you still want me to talk about that?
5 years.
5 years.
Let's say 5. Let's reduce to 5.
Just 5. So I think in 5 years' time, we will have a structure within NELFUND that is firmly focused on the student, that is firmly, that has some good structures in it of transparency, so that everybody in this country can see how much money we've received as NELFUND, how much money we've disbursed. Everybody will have the opportunity to question the numbers. If there are mistakes, they can shout because mistakes can be made. People will have the opportunity to say, okay, look, we don't agree with the way you're doing it. We have suggestions for you. This is how we think you might want to go. There'll be proper channels to make sure that this is an intuitive process that people can learn as they go along. We're excited about the prospect of getting to that point. But at the moment, we're just focused on trying to put some structures in.
All right. I like the fact that you are trying to deconstruct the mindsets of people that mistakes cannot happen. But would encourage that they shouldn't happen often. I think that's the major problem Nigerians have when the mistakes happen pretty often. But now it takes us to our next question. You talked about inclusivity. And I think I have a 3-part question on that. First would be access to these loans by the underprivileged communities, and I mean rural communities, because you talked about making it a digital kind of application where you had to just click a button and all of that. But we know that not many people have access to this gadget. Now, if we're even looking at the people that need the loans, there will be people in these communities who probably have zero to no access to gadgets like this that they can apply. How do you plan on including these people? That's one part. Secondly, this loan fund targets public institutions, right?
Yes.
What modalities have you put in place to ensure that private institutions as well are captured in the frame of NELFUND to have access to these loans? That's the second question. Let's just go on with this and then.
Okay, so look, let me tackle the private institutions first. And let me say that private institutions came up in this country because public institutions were letting people down. There were strikes. People were spending 8 years in institutions, publicly owned institutions, where they should have been spending 4. The private institutions came up to fill that gap. We must not disrespect the fact that they tried to plug a gap that appeared because the public institutions were failing.
Okay.
Now that we're fixing the public institutions by making sure that they have enough funds to fix themselves and to upgrade, it's a threat to the private institutions. Because if the public institutions attain the standards that people would like them to attain, the private institutions may end up losing students. So we have to respect that fact that these people came up, they invested to plug a gap.
Yeah.
And now that's being threatened by what we're doing. The law at the moment doesn't allow us to fund students to go to private institutions. The president is very keen, because he spoke to me about this, he's very keen that we ensure that every Nigerian is captured, whether they're going to a public institution or a private one.
Okay.
But there will need to be an amendment in the law. As of today, the majority, and to your question about, you know, students who are in rural areas, students who are truly indigent, you generally will not find them in private institutions. Generally. And please don't misunderstand me. There are some indigent students in private institutions, but the majority of students who are indigent are in public institutions. Most of them are from rural areas. To your other question around, you know, devices and digital and how that all that works, it is important that we reach out to people in the rural areas, that we take devices to them and enable them to apply. Part of the issues we have are related to poverty, extreme levels of poverty where people can't afford these fancy devices that I see before me today. And even when they get these devices, there's probably, if the further you go away from the city, the less connectivity you have to the internet. So we're going to commence on road shows very soon. Okay? We've had to do this in phases where we go to rural communities and we actively recruit people who want to take these loans. We'll go with the devices, we'll go with the internet connectivity, and we'll make sure that we can get them all on board. I think one of the reasons that we have the poverty that's created this question in the first place is that we haven't had the continuity in education over the last 60 years that allows people to create wealth to be able to afford iPads and iPhones and the rest of it. So part of what we're also trying to do is eliminate poverty with this education that takes us to a place perhaps in 15 years time, not 5, where people can afford these devices and where the nation is vibrant enough for people to invest in internet connectivity in, you know, areas that are considered to be rural.
All right.
So all of these things connect up. I think I'm talking too much.
No, that's fine. I like the fact that you're explaining that properly. But we hear that NELFUND plans to expand the loan scheme to skills and vocations and what have you. How do you plan on doing that? Seeing as in Nigeria, we see other developed parts of the country where all of these businesses are registered. We have plumbing, we have all of these registered formally. Nigeria is not a country that has that registered for now. We might do that eventually, but for now we don't have that. How do you plan to monitor the scheme from this angle? Okay, so a couple of things I want to say about the scheme. The first thing I want to say is that we think that we can impact the lives of about 50 million people by giving them one skill that they didn't have before. In order for us to get to the point where you're talking about, those skills have to be certified. So you have to be able to show a piece of paper to say, I'm a bona fide plumber. So one of the things that we're having to do in the background is to look at how we ensure that you only employ somebody to come and fix the gas in your home because they are trained in gas safety, not just putting 2 pipes together. So, you know, we're looking very closely at how we ensure that the ones that in particular have a safety element to it are provided proper training. Eventually, there's massive digitalization going on in this country. If you want to take one of our loans at NELFUND, you will have to have NIN. You will have to have a BVN because we don't give cash. Everything goes through the banking system. You will have to have some sort of registration in an institution approved by the government. In other words, approved by NELFUND or approved by a government agency that says that this institution can give you the education you need, can give you the teaching you need, and is properly registered and is working properly. We will eventually get to a point where people will not be able to get jobs with good companies. Good companies will not be able to get contracts with government institutions unless they're employing people who are properly trained, properly qualified. The investment is going into making all of that training happen, but it's a value chain. And I think eventually, just like you can't walk into a hospital today and be operated upon by somebody certified a doctor, they have to have some
by the time you get into a hospital and you're a nurse or a doctor, you've shown your piece of paper to lots of people, and people have seen that you're actually competent at what you do.
Sure.
We'll have to do that with plumbers, we'll have to do that with electricians, we'll have to do that with carpenters, we'll have to do that with people doing CNG, people touching gas, people selling petrol. These are all areas that we have to, and luckily for us, it's not new. We were there before in Nigeria. This is what happens and is acceptable globally. It's what happens on the academic side. We just need to make sure that we push it to the vocational side, and we're putting digital first, in terms of making sure that we know who you are, we know what you're registered to do. You know, I'll give you a very small example. You have your car, you drive it to the vulcanizer, the tires somewhat low. You know, you're supposed to put, you know, 23 psi into it in terms of pressure. The vulcanizer, who's not educated, puts 60. You're driving on the bridge, tire explodes, straight in the lagoon. There are issues here of safety. There are lots of people who lose their lives in this country because of the incompetence of a person who learned a skill from somebody else who didn't teach them.
That's true.
So we have to do this properly, and we can have a full day if you invite me to this.
Okay, all right. We've been talking, we've made you talk for about 30 minutes. It's time for us to go for a very short break. And of course, when we come back, I do have lots of questions regarding to how students feel, their fears, most importantly, and of course try to wrap things up on the part of NELFUND. It's a broad conversation, but when we come back, we'll try to see where we could touch. Also, ICPC is still on the list. We'll still talk about that part as well. Don't go anywhere, still rapid on. All right, welcome back. Still Rapid Done, and we've been talking about NELFUND student loan disbursement and all of the controversies surrounding it. The good thing is that our guest has been able to, you know, a bit of put our mind to rest, and of course with the fact that the ICPC has come out to clear the air regarding to that. But I would want you to comment on that. Looking at something was said before, they came out to clear the air. Like I asked you when we're off air, NELFUND at some point give them a reason to poke their eyes and started an investigation. If even the reps at some point did call for, I won't call it interrogation, a meeting. Let's call it a meeting. You know, so all of these bodies coming to say, ask questions regarding to that. How did you perceive the entire situation?
Yeah, it is a very interesting situation, and I think it had a lot more positives to it than negative, and I'll explain to you why I say that. We have been working with the ICPC for months. We've been working with the EFCC for months. In fact, we received 50 billion naira in intervention funds from the EFCC. So some of the money we're spending and disbursing came from the proceeds of crime. So,
wow, when you put it that way,
repurposing.
Yeah, the president intervened and said, this thing must go on. We can't wait for the bureaucratic process to give you funds. So one of the funds, pots of fund that he accessed for us was 50 billion naira proceeds of crime from the FCC. So we recognize that with the kind of money that we're disbursing to individuals that we never meet, you have to be able to work with the security agencies, with the investigation agencies, so that if there is a problem, you can address it as soon as possible. So the ICPC have worked very closely with us. A statement came out from the ICPC, and I'll be very specific. The statement came out and said that there was diversion of funds by NELFUND.
Yeah.
Okay, so we saw that, and as a management team, and we reacted the following day, almost immediately. I think the statement came out in the afternoon. My phone was blowing up. Everybody was like, hey, you know, you have all this money. We don't know what's going on. Anyway, so we reacted and went back to the ICPC. The ICPC was very gracious. They were very gracious, because what they did was, rather than allow the allegation to hang and do damage to the agency, they reviewed the statement they had made, and came out with a clarification statement saying, at that material point in time, as far as they were aware, there were no there was no evidence of diversion of funds. Some of this came about because in working with the ICPC, it had come to our notice because of a newspaper report that certain media groups had been to institutions to interview students and had discovered that some students were disgruntled because, remember I talked about double payments earlier?
Yes.
They paid, we paid. And they felt they were being given the runaround by the institutions. In certain cases, we had paid the fees. The students hadn't paid. We had paid the fees on behalf of the students. The students were not being told that the fees had been paid, even though we informed the students through our platform that your fees have been paid. This created a schism, okay? There was a disconnect between what we were claiming and what the students were saying they were receiving or benefiting from. Okay. And that seemed to center around, in some cases, more in certain institutions than in others. So of course the ICPC triggered an investigation, and of course when you investigate like that, you go backwards, you go forwards, you make it holistic. They have to look at everything. They look at everything from the origin, from us, okay, all the way through to the students, okay? And that's what they should be doing, and I expect them to do that on a continuous basis. The fact that they issued a rebuttal saying that they didn't mean that doesn't mean they have given us a clean bill of health for life. No. They have to carry on following the money. Yeah. So, you know, as far as we're concerned, there was an error that the leadership of the ICPC were gracious enough to accept that there was an error and to announce it publicly. They could have left it hanging, and all we'll be discussing today is where's the money.
Where's the money?
But you know what? That's not so much of a problem for us, because we know there's no money missing. The problem is that students suddenly decide we're not applying because we don't trust those people.
Which people, the school or you?
Oh, NELFUND. If you say that money has been diverted by an organization that's keeping money for the students are going to lose confidence in that organization.
Before we turn to something else, I do have a question regarding to students as well, because I mean, at the center of it all is the students.
Sure.
There are some students complaining that they applied for these loans months ahead, and now they've graduated and the funds have been sent to the school. What happened to these funds that have been sent to the school and the students already graduated?
So what should happen is that the institution should refund the students.
Will they?
Well, I don't run an institution, but I'll tell you what, they are supposed to refund the fund. If two sets of funds have been paid for one individual, in other words, double fees have been paid, the normal thing you would expect is for a refund to be made to the student.
And if they don't?
Well, the investigative agencies are onto this, okay? I can tell you now that they are onto this. And the reason they're onto it is because potentially it can be seen, or it can be seen as defrauding the students, okay? I'm not naming any institutions, okay? But it can be seen or interpreted in that way. Therefore, it is important, and you need to remember, the investigation agencies have access to all accounts. We're cooperating with them fully. We ask the institutions to acknowledge payments when they receive payments from us, and they do. They write to us to say, we received this amount of money from you on this day for this number of students. We share all our information with the investigation agencies. Or investigative agencies. So it is extremely important that schools who are holding double funds refund in full those funds to the students who have asked for it. We're asking students to approach their institution, ask for the refund because they have evidence that we've paid. They obviously have evidence that they've paid. They should ask for a refund, and the refund should come back to them in full. We're looking to see how we can work with the institutions to make sure that they're not disadvantaged, because it's important for me to point this out. If a student applies for the loan a week before the registration closes, we will still process the loan because they've already applied. If the school says there's a deadline and if you don't pay, you can't sit an exam, they're going to look for the money.
I'm referring specifically to those who have graduated. You're answering for those who receive double funds.
Those are the ones that we're talking about.
I'm talking about those who have graduated.
No, the ones that have graduated,
they must have paid.
Yes.
You're talking about somebody who graduated last month. They paid their fees, but we also paid their fees.
So
some of them have left. and they're looking at their dashboard and it's saying you owe NELFUND 148,000 naira.
Yes.
But they paid the 148,000 naira to the school.
Before they left.
But they've left. So those are double payments. So those people who have left the institution have a right, a proper right to get their funds back. They can't be, beholden to a debt and also have paid, because even the other funds may have been borrowed funds.
Okay. Let me ask, can the monies be refunded to NELFUND directly?
The answer is potentially yes. However, why? We only expect refunds from institutions if the institution has been overpaid by us. Okay? We don't expect them to refund to us and then us to start. It's a complexity that we don't need. There is a relationship between the student and the institution. A different relationship between the student and NELFUND. If the student has double paid, then the institution should either pay the student back or they should refund what we paid for the student to us. Not refund the student's money to us, but yes, they can refund to us what we paid on behalf of the student. And the student can then say, well, look, I don't want the loan anymore.
Let me ask this question. So from research, it says that the ratio of men to women or boys to girls that apply for this loan is a 4-to-1 ratio. And yes, that was published online. 4-to-1 ratio. So more men tend to apply for these loans much more than women. Has NELFUND looked into this?
Okay, so on the statistic, I'm not disagreeing. I know my expressions seem to indicate but look, there is clearly a greater number of men, boys applying for these loans than women. This is not a Nigerian phenomenon. Globally, it's recognized that opportunities tend to be more accessible across the world to men. That's why you see all these sort of women's groups, all these women's advocacy, equal rights, equal opportunities. It's not unique to Nigeria. And again, I don't want us to debrand Nigeria by saying, this is going on here. I don't want to name other countries, but there are some countries that even institutionalize the discrimination against women. But our job is to ensure that we sensitize women to the opportunity and we encourage them to come out and go to school. There are cultures in this country that discourage women from getting an education. Those cultures are well embedded. Culture is a very difficult thing to tamper with. But there are specific initiatives for us. We've even got a women's group within the NELFUND itself.
Do we have a men's group within NELFUND?
Men don't seem to have a problem, according to the statistics.
Cynthia is just a man's person, so
wow,
male person. But the ratio is very poor, and that's why it's very obvious.
My hands are up.
So the men don't have a problem, but the women they do have a problem.
And I agree. Right,
it was a group he mentioned that I asked. There's a women's group, but is it a men's group?
Cynthia, why do they need it? They don't even have a problem. Do they have a problem here? 4-to-1. That's very bad.
It's an affirmative approach that we're taking to see how well we can equalize things. And we know the importance of the role of women in families in this country, in the education of children. The men go out now because they had previous opportunities or previous advantages. They go to work. It's the women that sit with the children and nurture them and bring them up. And if the women are not well educated, the children are not going to be well educated. Women are not well exposed, children are not going to be well exposed. So really, we are positively trying to favor groups, women, people with disabilities. Any group that seems to have a disadvantage, we have to have some sort of focus to ensure that we try to equalize the game, because it's an equal opportunities initiative that the president has asked us to implement.
I would say much before matter come to my dream, but I have a final question before we wrap up, which is about people who want to jakpa. Some feel like it's going to hinder their chances because they are owing a loan. Does it hinder you from traveling?
So let me be clear about a couple of things. This is not a slave contract. The fact that you take a loan from NELFUND doesn't turn you into a slave of NELFUND, a slave of Nigeria. If you're, in fact, I can tell you that given where we are today, people who jakpa and go to countries and get jobs, good jobs,
they pay faster.
It's not a slave contract. There's no list at the airport that says, oh, you have a loan, you can't leave the country.
Go back to your country.
That loan doesn't, that list doesn't exist. I can also tell you that, you know, because a person has a loan doesn't mean you can render them stateless. Okay, it's a loan, right? And, you know, but of course there are going to be things put in place that will seek to encourage people to pay back. Just like if you want to get a contract from a federal government entity, you have to have certain pieces of paper that show that you're a good citizen of the country. Being a good citizen is paying your loan back if you can. But just to allay the fears of people who think that if I take this loan, I can't go to Canada, I can't go to America. It's not true. You know, this loan is for everybody and anybody who needs it. And the idea is that we give you this loan, you go and get an education and you become prosperous. If that prosperity is somewhere else for you, go and get it. Go and get the prosperity. Pay us back so we can educate somebody else who might want to stay in Nigeria.
All right. So let me ask, can a state government, now we're using Edo State.
Edo State?
Yes, as case study.
Is that your state?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Can a state government partner with NELFUND to create more access to more education for people from within that state? How does that work?
Okay, so thank you. That's a really great question. On the skills acquisition side, on the skills training side, a good number of states have recognized that the best way for them to grow the economy of their state is to get to set up vocational training centers. States already own universities, they own polytechnics, they own colleges of education. They already own these facilities, and we already have some sort of engagement with the state-owned institutions. On the vocational side, some states, some very proactive governors have set up skills training centers. They recognize that to boost the economy of their states, they can't be waiting for people to go and study philosophy, classics, you know, social anthropology. They need people who can fix the road, who can fix buildings, who can build things, who can fix solar panels, who can fix cars, maybe even fix airplanes. Okay. So those states are working with us they're collaborating with us so that we can bring our loan scheme to their indigents or to the people who live in their states to access those skill centers, which in some cases they own, because we don't own skill centers. So that's the sort of collaboration that we are seeing emerging.
All right.
And you mentioned Edo State. I'm not sure why.
But anyways, thank you. You have answered the question. And I must say that this has been quite an enlightening interview, because I feel like most of the misconceptions have been cleared, which is the reason it has been clear.
I hope so. But you know, there'll be more, and you know, bring me back, and I'll clear the ones that come up again.
Certainly, you can count on that.
We're not
certainly
afraid.
bring you back when there are
misconceptions
misconceptions that needs to be addressed. Thank you so much for joining us on the interview.
Thank you, Martha. Appreciate it. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right.
Please have me back.
You're welcome. We've been talking to Mr. Akin today. Managing Director and CEO, Nigeria Education Loan Fund, that's popularly called NELFUND. It has been a great conversation this beautiful morning. And I must tell you that if you missed it, you have a chance, an opportunity to go to our YouTube channel, Official Rapid TV, to check out these conversations and many other conversations right there on our YouTube. Don't also forget that we are available on all social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, dancing for you and giving you all of the updates. Of course, we'll come back tomorrow morning with another great conversation. I'm looking forward to that conversation already, because it's going to be something of what's happening in Akwa Ibom State. There's a whole lot happening right there. And,
Cynthia likes gossip, you know.
It's not gossip.
It's gossip.
It's not gossip.
But if you like it too, I know you guys like it too. So if you like it too, then
just like how we gossiped about NELFUND today.
We didn't gossip. We educated.
So we'll educate you about Akwa Ibom State and everything happening there. My name is Cynthia Agbo.
And this is Martha Alu. You can call me Martha. See you tomorrow.